Welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I am Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3, and I am so excited that you are with me. If you were listening on the radio, then you've heard the first half of the segment, and you've heard a brief introduction, a little bit of the bio of our special guest. If you're on YouTube, then after you watch this entire interview, you can then go into the description box and then you'll see a snippet of her bio. However, it is my hope that you would get everything you need out of this interview. So we're going to start with a little bit of a candid conversation with my special guest, Miss Yolanda Mack. And we're going to find out exactly who she is, just a little deep dive, but I'll give you a little hint. I could possibly call her Judge Yolanda Mack, but we'll see. All right. So Yolanda, welcome to the show. So happy to have you. If you can just share with us a little bit about your background. Who are you? Where were you? How did you grow up and where and all that good stuff?
Well, first I want to say thank you for having me, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you. But I am Yolanda Mack, just a little girl from DeKalb County. I'm a native of DeKalb. I attended Avondale Elementary School. I'm a graduate of Avondale High School, the first DeKalb Center of the Performing Arts. I will save you the song and dance, but it was the first DeKalb Center of the Performing Arts, and I grew up here, working class family. I'm the only daughter. I have two brothers, and after graduating high school here, I decided I wanted to get away and go out of state. I attended an HBCU, which is Alcorn State University. I enjoyed it there. I had a great experience. There, I initiated at Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And I decided, that I wanted to go to law school. I majored in political science, and I thought, well, what's next? And I just wanted to go to law school. So I applied at Texas Southern, Thurgood Marshall School of Law, which is another HBCU I thought would be great. I was in Mississippi, so it wasn't that far away. Some people, ask, how did you get to Texas? I'm like, well, I was just one or two states over, I attended Texas Southern Thurgood Marshall School of Law. And after graduating there, I returned back here home to the Metro Atlanta area, where I started my career as a public servant.
That's awesome. So let's talk about your professional career. How did you start? What role did you start at, and where are you as of right now before we jump into the campaign?
Absolutely. Well, it's funny. I always wanted to, when I was in law school, I was like, well, I know I want to help people. And as you can imagine, that wasn't very popular because people are like, how are you going to make money? That's what you need to know coming out of law school and pay off this debt. But I was just so interested in helping people and, using my career to go back home and do some good. And so I started my career as a public defender. I started right here in the Metro Atlanta area at the Fulton Public Defender's Office. It was interesting. I had done a summer, I had participated in the governor's intern program and had clerked with Judge Michael Hancock in DeKalb County the summer before. And he knew the public defender, Vernon Pitts in Fulton. And I worked there like basically free labor as an intern until I passed the bar. And then once I passed the bar, I started as a public defender. It was great. It started my career off where I understood that people weren't the worst of their problems. And just to really kind of have compassion, if you will, for people who were charged with crimes. I did that for about 5 years, and then I transitioned into prosecution. I'm currently the deputy of the sexual assault unit in the Fulton DA's office, where I advocate on behalf of women and young adults. They're not really children, but college age young adults who have been the victims of sexual assault. And prior to that, I was actually recruited from the DeKalb DA's office by DA Willis. I was actually the deputy over there over the domestic violence and sexual assault unit. And so I was there in DA Boston's first term. And then when DA Willis was elected, she asked me to come over to head her sexual assault unit. And so that's what I'm currently doing now.
Okay. Just so you know, when I am looking down, I'm taking notes.
Okay. No problem.
But I am listening. Okay, so let's talk about the public defender role.
Yeah.
What has that done to shape the way you view law, justice, and government as a whole?
You know what? Since I've been running for judge, I have realized like that was almost like the best thing that I could have done starting my career because I started my career learning a lot about people who are charged with crimes. And even as a prosecutor, learning that there's more than one side to a story. I always look at things from both sides. I understand the importance of being fair. I think, I represented a lot of people who may have even been guilty. A lot of times their frustrations were that they didn't feel heard when they went to court. They felt like they weren't getting their day in court. And so I learned that a lot of times people can accept the results. They can accept, the sentences if they feel like they were treated fairly and they were heard. And so even as a prosecutor, as this role running for judge, I've gotten the support of so many defense attorneys because they understand. I always listen. I always understand. I may not have all the facts, and in the end, I do try to make a decision based on not only, the one side, but listening to both and following the evidence. And so it really has shaped my career in a way to constantly look at things from more than one side. Things are not always what they seem, and sometimes they are, you know what I'm saying? But just being kind of open to listening and kind of understanding. And I believe being a public defender shaped the way that I even prosecuted cases.
So I interviewed attorney Robert Patillo, and the conversation around being a public defender versus a private attorney came up. Having been in that role, and he actually spoke very highly of individuals who have served in that role, because he was saying that you're going to get the best trial experience doing that. But one of the things he mentioned too, though, is the workload. And so how is it possible to provide adequate amount of time and energy, resources towards every single client when you have a huge workload?
As a public defender, even as a prosecutor, a lot of times victims will say, you're overwhelmed. I know that you're really busy, and I always explain to them, I'm not too busy for your case. I'm not too overwhelmed for your case. And if I wasn't working on your case, I would be working on someone else's case. And so it always eases, a person's mind, because I think everyone thinks everyone's too busy to do a good job. Now, what I will say is that I think in government, a lot of times we all feel like, oh, we're overworked, right? And underpaid. And I just think that's, but as a public defender, you learn how to manage your cases. You learn how to be committed to what's in front of you. A lot of times you're managing cases. If it's a trial, I'll tell other, defendants, other people are calling. I'm like, I'm totally committed to this case at this point. And people understand because they want the same commitment, when it's their case. So could you use more help? Sure. I think there are a lot of jobs where it would really help me, if I had less cases. But I can say the work that we do as a public defender, as a prosecutor, it doesn't lack because you have that amount of cases. It's a lot of people, they're dedicated and committed to that work.
That's a great point. So would you agree that there aren't any disparities between having a private attorney versus a public defender if you allow the process to work? Now, that's not to say that all public defenders are doing what you're doing, but should you have a good public defender, would you say that the quality of service that you'll receive would be comparable to having a private attorney?
It is. Some of the best lawyers that I go up against as a prosecutor is the public defender, because they have the experience. They are there all the time. They have worked, like me, thousands of cases, tried hundreds of cases, and many of them are good at it, So, and they have the relationships with us, and we understand how they work. I think there are benefits, but I think people, kind of lessen, oh, it's a public defender. Oh, it's not a paid lawyer. We would hear that all the time. But a lot of people who do that work, they're really committed to it. They're really passionate about it. They could have their own practices. There's nothing that stops them. They have the same legal degree that everyone else has, but they have a passion for, the indigent, defendants, and doing that work. And it shows.
I agree. And I think that the whole mindset that I'm getting ready to speak to comes from having that HBCU background, right? I also went to HBCU, went to North Carolina A&T State University. Yes, Aggie Pride on my Aggie. But I was taught, to have this hunger when you come out of school, right? To go and make a difference and to do something and be something, right? And I think that's that mindset I'm hearing, where it's like, it almost feels like if you have a public defender, it's a possibility that you're going to get somebody who's hungry to make a name for themselves and to prove that they're good at what they do, which sometimes that's a better motivator than, having the private attorney. Not that I'm against it. We have our private attorneys, so please don't,
Right, absolutely.
But so let's talk about some of the caseloads that you've had. Would you say primarily you worked more on the criminal side of things, or is it just run the gamut, or is there one particular area of law that you've typically have found yourself in?
It's mainly on the criminal side of things. As a public defender, as criminal, as a prosecutor, as criminal now, you do have some civil hearings. So let's say you have a defendant who has mental health issues. And there's a competency issue. Then you will have a civil trial. And so that's not criminal. And so you would pick a civil jury and then make a determination of whether the person is competent to stand trial prior to trying their criminal case. But most of the cases would be criminal cases.
Okay, so speaking of that, so now the role that you are running for is judge. I'm going to let you talk a lot more about that in just a few seconds. But I really want to speak to, that role and what you can bring to that, having been on this side. I guess we could say on this side of the aisle, so to speak. Not literally, y'all. Please don't take it.
Absolutely.
We actually, we'll talk about that later. But so yeah, if you could just talk about the race that you are in right now and give us all the details on it for those who don't know. And then how you plan to use your past experience in that role. Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion.
So I'm running for DeKalb County State Court Judge. Judge Purdom held that seat for many, many years, and he's retiring. And so it's an open seat. And for those of you who don't know, state court handles criminal and civil cases. I tell people all the time with the criminal cases, anyone can find themselves in state court. It doesn't take a lot of effort necessarily. It's really your lower level offender cases. If you get in a pushing match with someone, you can end up in state court. DUI comes to state court. Domestic violence cases are in state court. And a lot of the domestic violence cases is going to be your lower level offenders. And when I say lower level, as far as no weapons involved, no prior 2 or 3 domestic violence cases. So you're talking about maybe your first time, or your second time in a domestic violence situation. And then you have the civil side. Civil side, personal injury. Those would be like your car accident cases. Medical malpractice. That's where you may be suing the hospital. Maybe there was some surgery. You didn't think it went how it was supposed to go, and you're suing the hospital. Breach of contract. So those are the type of things on the civil side that we do. And so as far as my experience, I will say that, as far as what you will see a lot of on the criminal side, although you see everything, you'll see a lot of DUI and you'll see a lot of domestic violence. I can tell you that I prosecuted, when I was in Fulton as a prosecutor before I was in the leadership role. I was doing major case and high profile cases, which is going to be your murders and your vehicular homicides, your serious injury by vehicle cases. And while doing those cases, I did receive Attorney of the Year. And so I say that to say that your DUI cases, I've handled the DUI cases on a higher level where you're dealing with where someone was seriously injured, or a vehicular homicide. And so you're using the same and similar witnesses, your doctors, your toxilizers, your crime scene reconstruction, those things in your DUI cases. And then, you have a lot of family violence, family violence / domestic violence cases. And I have supervised those cases. So when I was the deputy in the DeKalb DA's office, I would review the cases from the solicitor's office to determine whether they would rise to the level of becoming felonies, or if they should go stay in state court and be prosecuted, as misdemeanors. I'm currently on the board of the International Women's House, which is a domestic violence shelter that services families in DeKalb County. So I'm intimately familiar with domestic violence cases. And as far as civil, when you're dealing with your personal injury, your medical malpractice cases, while doing the crimes against women and children cases, which is their sex crimes. On the criminal side, I received Attorney of the Year while prosecuting those cases, and I can tell you it's the same. You're dealing with your hospitals. In criminal cases, the burden is higher, than in your civil cases. In criminal cases, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. In your civil cases, it's like more than likely than not. And so you're still dealing with the same similar issues. When you're suing a nursing home, I have a nursing home case now where an elderly woman was sexually assaulted there. And so you do have the civil case that's happening where they're suing the nursing home. And so I'm intimately familiar with, the documents and, what they need to prove, in the civil cases and suing. So they kind of go hand in hand. They're not exactly the same, but I think when you handle over thousands of cases and try hundreds of cases, it gives you the transferable skills to be able to handle, the criminal and the civil docket.
Perfect. So I want to talk about some hot button issues that people talk about when it comes to our judicial system. Now, I know that your race is a nonpartisan race, correct?
It is. Judges are nonpartisan.
Okay, so the questions, while they may be political in nature, I'm not asking from the political response, right? I want to know from the judicial side. So let's talk about illegal immigration. That's something that's really big right now, particularly in Georgia with the whole Laken Riley situation and what happened with her. As a judge, how do you balance having to obviously not play the political game, but just focus in on what's happening? However, understanding that we are up against some challenges with our border at this time. So how would you deal with illegal immigration in your court?
Well, this is what I can say. We won't really have a lot of that, really in state court, right? Those are not the cases that we handle there. But, you can find sometimes you have people who are charged, who are illegal. I've had it in Superior Court, you'll have it in state court. And I think the good thing about judges being nonpartisan to me is because you have to work in a way where you have to listen to both sides, all opinions. You have to know what's going on in the community from all sides, because you can't just banter. You just can't go to one side and say, hey, I'm over here because I'm on this political side, or I'm over here. So I like that about judges. I like the fact that while we're running, we have to go out and, appeal to each side and see what the concerns are, because they all vote for judges. And so I say that to say, as a public defender, I've represented people who were illegal, but, in the system, there are things set up for that. I think as a judge, you deal with the issues that are in front of you. If someone is illegal, they still have the charges, here that are in front of them. And I think you still have to listen to the evidence and the facts, and they have to adhere to the same standards and the law as everyone else. And I think that is the main thing with judges.
You said something that I didn't know. You said you have represented illegal people who may have been illegal. In that, I think a lot of people will feel that if you're not a citizen, then you're not entitled to certain amenities or just. So how do we explain that? Because that kind of
the thing is, in our judicial system, so as a public defender, someone gets arrested for committing a crime. You may find out, oh, they're illegal. It still doesn't mean they have committed a crime in the state of Georgia and in the county.
Okay. So what you're saying is that the court system works regardless of citizenship. It's just, this is our system. So if you commit a crime, even if you're illegal, you still have to go through our system.
Correct. You still have to go through our system, because if you commit a crime here in the state of Georgia, in our county, the rules apply to someone who's illegal just as it does to someone who's legal. And so they can't, right. So we don't say, oh, they're illegal if they committed a crime. We don't have jurisdiction over them. We do. Because the crime is committed here. And so they are entitled, if they can't afford an attorney, to an attorney to be appointed to them.
So is it an automatic in those instances that even as you're representing them, that at some point they're going to be deported because they committed a crime? Or is it depend on what the crime is that determines whether or not they're deported?
Yes. Well, sometimes the question is, when are they deported?
Mhm.
A lot of times when they're illegal and there's a hold on them from ICE where they've indicated that they're illegal, the question is usually when, you know, what we want to do with the case, and then make a determination of when they will be deported.
Okay.
So it's usually not an if, it's usually when.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Usually when, is it after the sentence?
Mhm.
A lot of times immigration waits to see what happens with the criminal case.
Okay.
And then once the criminal case is done, they make a decision on when they will start the deportation process. So it's usually a when.
Okay. That's interesting. I'm glad we're able to talk about that and kind of clear that up a little bit. I think there's a big misconception, right? So, and what I don't want is people to say, well, for the judge, and you have people who are upset that you are even talking to them because they're illegal. So there is a process, and so I'm glad we cleared that up. Now let's talk about another topic that's kind of it's been talked about, and that's the relationship between our judges and our law enforcement, our police officers. There's a understanding that oftentimes they are arresting people over and over and over again because the judges are putting them back on the streets like repeatedly. We had an instance that where I saw the Board of Corrections, and there was an instance where someone was arrested and then they were put back on the street, and now they're gone and we couldn't find them. So as a judge, how would you address that issue of, just kind of these repeated patterns of problematic behavior that our law enforcement have to deal with repeatedly?
Well, the thing about judges is that you have to look at every case, every individual that comes before you separately. Yeah, we realize that things are going on in the world, but the people who come before you, victims and defendants, this is their case. This is specific to them. And so there are things in place that judges are to consider. Judges are to consider the facts of the case in front of them, the evidence, that law enforcement has provided. And then there is something that's called recidivism that judges are also to consider, right? When deciding bond and when deciding, sentences. And so I think recidivism is what we call it. People who have committed multiple crimes is something that judges consider when they have a defendant in front of them.
Now, I think that's a great discussion. Let's continue to talk about let's talk about bail reform. Where do you stand on bail reform? And if you can explain to people what that really means, because there's so many explanations, and people, I think they get confused around what it means. But for you, what is bail reform, and how do you plan on either utilizing or not utilizing it, or where do you stand on bail reform?
Well, this is what I can tell you about bail. When a person comes in front of the judge, there are some factors that a judge is to consider. We call them, they are the Ayala factors. And so the judge is to consider, whether someone has any ties to the community, whether they are risk to reoffend, the nature, of the charges, that are in front of them. And so I think each individual that comes in, the judge has to look at those factors and make a determination on whether that person qualifies for bond or what type of bond, whether it's a cash bond, whether they can use property or surety, go through, a bonding company. And I think all of those things are on a case-by-case basis.
How do we go about ensuring that when we set bail, that we're setting something that is actually, that will create a consequence, right? That will be a strong enough consequence to help prevent the repeated patterns. Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion.
I don't think it's any way to ensure that. I think that each judge has to review and then make a determination on what's in front of them, what is a reasonable bond, in light of the facts and the circumstances. And I don't think it's any way to know, what someone may or may not do if they get out. but you can look at what's in front of you. You can look at their history, and you can make a determination. If they had cases before, did they come back? Did we have to look for them? I think the judges can consider all those things, but I don't think it's any way. You can't set punitive bonds. Like the whole point of bond, if a judge determines that the person qualifies for bond, you should do a bond that is reasonable in light of the facts and the circumstances that I talked about earlier, the Ayala factors. So I don't think it's any way to guarantee any of that, but the judges should consider all those things when giving someone a bond.
That answered my question. I know I was struggling to get to it, but that actually answered my question when you said that if it's determined that they qualify for a bond, then you're supposed to give them a bond that is reasonable to meet. So that answers that question. So we can't punish people, so to speak, by saying that because of your crime, because of how many times you've been in this courtroom, I'm going to give you this crazy bond. We can't do that. Got it.
Right, because if you determine that, then as a judge, you may want to decide the person doesn't qualify for a bond.
Okay.
Right?
Gotcha.
The judge can determine that. A judge can say, hey, from looking at everything that's in front of me, from your history, with the number of open cases that you have, a judge can make a determination that they don't believe that this person qualifies for a bond. Got
it. What's some things that you were going to bring to the court that's different or innovative? What are you planning on bringing? That's something that's a part of your platform.
Well, I can tell you that DeKalb County has done an excellent job in state court of having what we call accountability courts, diversion courts, because, like I said, in state court, you have a lot of lower level offenders. So, everybody can't go to jail. Everybody shouldn't go to jail. You have to, have places for people to deal with what we call underlying issues. Sometimes it's mental health, sometimes it's drugs, sometimes it's alcohol. So I can tell you one thing that they don't currently have is a domestic violence court. And from my work of doing domestic violence cases, talking to victims day in, day out, a lot of times their underlying issues, they want their families to stay together. People say, oh, why don't they leave? There's a lot of reasons why, victims of domestic violence don't leave. So a lot of times at the beginning, when it's the first time, the second time, they would tell me things like, well, if he would just take his medication for some issues that he has, or if he didn't drink. And so I think accountability courts a lot of times can put some things into place for those lower level offenders where the families want to stay together and deal with some of the issues.
That's interesting. And so you're going to attach that to some of the domestic violence cases, which I think that's pretty interesting because this is unpopular opinion, but I know there's a difference between someone who has committed these repeated acts and they're just a violent person, and then a couple that's had a outburst, right? And so I like the idea of figuring out ways to kind of work through that without it, completely destroying the family or breaking down the relationships. I like that. Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion. Let's do something fun. So the would you rather is not political. It's none of that stuff. It's just going to be pure fun. We're hoping you can just answer the question. Now, a lot of times, a lot of my guests have provided explanations, but you're supposed to just answer it.
Okay.
So let's see if we can get through that. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Would you rather live in a beach house or a mountain cabin?
Beach house.
Beach. Okay. Would you rather have the power of super strength or super speed?
Strength.
Okay. Would you rather never use social media ever again or never watch TV again?
Never watch TV.
Okay. Would you rather always have perfect weather for outdoor activities or never have to wait in line again?
Never have to wait in line. Waiting in line is the worst.
Okay, last one. Would you rather be able to teleport anywhere instantly or be able to read minds?
Teleport.
Okay.
It would save a lot of time.
That's funny. I say teleport as well because I don't think I want to read people's minds. I don't think I want to know everything.
It would be a very lonely existence, probably, if you could read every time someone's thinking something about you.
Exactly. Okay, I like to interject those fun little questions in there to kind of break up the monotony of the interview. But so on our closing segment, I want you to talk about some of the misconceptions that we get as it relates to the court system. And I think we've all experienced court at some point, whether it be traffic violation or anything. But what are some common misconceptions that can help people or help restore trust in our judicial system?
I think one of the main common misconceptions is that people think that no one cares about them, no one cares about their cases. I know sometimes it may appear that way, but I've been practicing in courtrooms for almost 30 years. And I can tell you, although sometimes on the outside it feels that way, people who work in the court system care about those cases, whether you're on the defense side and you care, whether you're a prosecutor and you're adamant and you care. And the judges really do care about getting it right. Sometimes, whatever right is may not be what you wanted it to be, but, we do spend a lot of time stressing over making sure, that we get it right. I think another misconception is that, they don't believe the court system wants to be open. And I mean, nowadays we're doing so many different things. A lot of judges, one thing I would do, have created YouTube channels. The courtrooms are open. A lot of people are having Zoom court, and a lot of judges have gone as far as to doing a YouTube, because we want it to be an open process. We want people to be able to listen in and get their own opinions, about what's happening. And so I think, those of us who, people like me who are running for judge, who are from the community, who is working in the community in different organizations, people say, oh, well, what's the importance of that? It's important because you want people to know, I want to understand, the community that's coming before me, in all of DeKalb County. And it's just not in the legal aspect, but the people, because these are people in their lives, from every aspect. And so those things are important.
When is your race, and how can people follow you, support you, find you, all that good stuff?
Okay, well, my race, early voting started on Monday, on April 29th, but the last day to vote is what we consider is May 21st, which is voting day. We are excited. We're running an excellent race here in DeKalb County. You can read more about me on all social media platforms and on my website, yolandaforjudge.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for answering the tough questions. I really like your ideas. I like that the accountability and, kind of adding that to around the domestic violence side of things. I really like that. So I wish you all the best. And we're going to drop this. And for everyone who's listening and watching right now, I want your feedback. Tell me what you think. Give some comments. And make sure you go and follow Yolanda as well so that you can stay abreast to what's happening in her race.
Thank you.